Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN. Today, we're going to be talking about Dead Kingdoms, possibility of kingdom merges, and this amazing update and feature that was just announced in the January face-to-face dev feedback for Rise of Kingdoms. That's something they're getting that possibly could work its way over to COD, and it probably should. So as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us off because it helps out a lot. So let's first go through and read what I think is a very important piece of information that was provided here in the face-to-face January hot topic Q&A with the devs. So we're really just going to focus on one part here, which is number 2. And the question provided is, are there any plans to merge multiple kingdoms in the future? The answer, Daily Double. As the game continues to operate, the gap in the number of active players between kingdoms is increasing. Some kingdoms have difficulty organizing enough players to participate in Ark of Osiris, KVK, and other gameplay. In recent offline meetings and in-game surveys, many governors have expressed a desire to merge servers. We also believe that merging servers can alleviate this issue to some extent. However, given RoK's unique social environment, we will do our best to avoid merging servers through mandatory assignment of players by the system. This plan is underway, and when it is complete, we will announce it through face-to-face with the developers and other forums. We look forward to your feedback. So there's a few pieces here, I think, to dissect before we get in and compare COD and maybe talk about RoK 2 as well. So where it says the gap in the number of active players between kingdoms is increasing. So what they're saying here is that even on their end, which I imagine is the back end, they see that the overall activity base per kingdom is increasing. As far as, let's say you have, you release 10 kingdoms, maybe you have a handful of them that are really active, whereas maybe before, now there could be a number of reasons for this as well. It could be due to the amount of players that are being populated into a kingdom before a new kingdom comes out. It could be maybe they don't have certain minimum thresholds in place. As an example, we've talked about this before, where let's say you put something as a minimum requirement where you need to have a certain amount of players that reach, City Hall 10 or City Hall 12 or something that is more than City Hall 4, let's say. And then once that kingdom reaches that amount of players that have reached a certain City Hall level, then the new kingdom comes out, right? So it's more about the minimum progression rate of the average player or total players compared to just having the kingdom being populated, right? Because you could have a kingdom populated with 20,000 new accounts, but maybe after one day, there's only 10,000 accounts. And then after day 2, there's only 7,000 accounts. And then you're a week in, and now you're down to about 2,000 accounts. Those numbers we don't really know, but I think they probably align closer to that especially you look at when you look at any kind of data for the amount of active alliances and players in those alliances, probably towards the end of the first season. Usually this lines up a little bit more where it probably is more of an extreme drop off, or maybe you're just not getting 20,000 new players that are being populated into a kingdom, right? Those are things and obviously numbers that we don't know. But I think it is kind of nice to at least hear a form of recognition from the developers on this front. The next part is some kingdoms have difficulty organizing enough players to participate in AOO, KVK, or other gameplay. Now, this I think just kind of goes hand in hand when you're specifically talking about, and really what they're focusing more here on this point is dead/low activity or inactive kingdoms. You're just not going to end up having enough people to participate in these. And they are absolutely right that when they say something such as, however, given RoK's unique social environment, we want to avoid merging servers through mandatory assignment of players by the system. Now, there's kind of two parts here, but the first part I'm going to focus on is the social engagement. Kingdom builders are social games. It's a large part of why a number of people participate and play. Sure, the gameplay, I imagine, is engaging. It's fun to a degree, depending on what level of contributions and participation you as an individual player put in. But I think it's pretty widely known at this point that a big reason why players like to play these particular games is because of that social connection. And being able, whether that's being able to chat in Discord, if that's hopping into a voice call with people or into a voice channel, if that's talking about, if that's, reading announcements, if it's just joining a Discord server for your alliance or your kingdom and just engaging there, or on the official Discord, or if it's just typing an alliance chat, maybe you're fine with just you're just very social in game, or maybe you do both in game and out of game. These are things that I believe very much appeal to a lot of players, and it's also a factor of replayability that kind of keeps them coming back. So when we think about the fact of merging dead kingdoms and inactive kingdoms, and keep in mind, we've talked about this before as it pertains to COD. Let me show you some numbers here, right? And this number I'm going to show you right now is from our top stats that we do, right? So for those of you that may or may not be familiar, right? Me and Fuzzy, Fuzzy is our software engineer. He basically pulls data across the entire game. Right, he shares with me. I'm able to kind of talk about that. I used to do all this manually by hand, so it is nice to be able to not have to do that anymore. However, I will call attention to your eyes when you look at this. This was our last, as of January 20th, so about a little bit less than a month ago. We did the top 25 dead kingdoms in the game, right? Our top 25 kingdoms that have the lowest activity, lowest power, right? These are basically what you would consider prime merging kingdoms or rebuilding kingdoms. Now, there is two ways to look at this. First off is that you can look at this purely as, oh, well, these are dead kingdoms, probably should be something merge worthy. And the second part is you can use these kingdoms as rebuild. Now, this is important because these 2 points do somewhat go hand in hand and have a little bit of a symbiotic relationship. And what this means is that if you have a dead kingdom, and yes, am I in favor of merging? Abso-freaking-lutely. We need to get on that just right away. Like, let's just, you know what I mean? Like, that's where we need to be at. However, I do believe that there should be some stipulations. I don't think that we should just merge kingdoms after, season 2. And that kind of brings me back now to the gameplay, which is like, okay, so let me just play my scenario. This is what I have said publicly, and I'll say it again because I think that it is the best way to do it going forward, or at least the best way to start testing and trying it, and then you can make adjustments from there. So we know that season 3, at least for CallofDragons, was just announced, right? And then it's probably going to be maybe Season of Strife after that, if it kind of follows somewhat to a similar RoK pattern. So we might have season 1, 2, 3, and then Season of Strife if it plays out that way. If so, the way I view it is that once your kingdom gets to Season of Strife, so you've played 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, once you get to Season of Strife, you can do this one of 2 ways. Either once you get to Season of Strife, if your kingdom is still, let's say, inactive, dead, and you haven't been able to maybe really participate, maybe you're at like 1 billion power or less, right, for your top 300 players, right, because that's what we were looking at data-wise, whatever the threshold is. And then you would look at other eligible kingdoms that are also within that criteria. And I'll give the example of, let's say you're saying 1 billion power for your top 300 players. Any kingdoms under that, by the time they reach Season of Strife, which technically would be the start of their 4th season, those kingdoms are eligible, right? So for example, they might get something like a season notification. So they would get, every player in that kingdom would get notified and say, your kingdom is as of now is eligible to be merged. And that can kind of maybe be like their final warning, so to speak, or like a final notification of, okay, now you're going to get 1 more season to potentially recruit people in, and you need to exceed above this point to then become ineligible, right? So then you get to play the 4th season out. If you do not exceed that and you're still below that threshold, then your kingdom would be officially put into a merging pool with other eligible kingdoms. And then the system would basically merge those. And what are you looking? You're not looking to build super kingdoms, right? You're looking to you would basically look at what the median average is. So you would look at all the active kingdoms in the game, and you would look at whatever the average power is. So like, let's say, as an example, the average power is 10 billion. Okay, well, you would try to merge enough kingdoms together to be at whatever the median average is, right? So you would try and get them as close as you can to 10 bill, not less, not high, and then it's kind of up to them at that point. Or option 2 is You let them play out the fourth season, in this case, Season of Strife, and then if they're still below the threshold, then you go ahead and tell them, hey, your kingdom is now up, or you are now eligible to be merged, right? Then you let them play out one more season. So they would basically either make it to the fourth season or the fifth season. It would be one of those two. Now, again, what would be the benefit of merging? I think it's pretty obvious, right? It's to boost activity. It's to take kingdoms that probably have 10 to 50 players, I would imagine on average, right? For kingdoms that are really inactive and dead, and that's what we're really talking about here. We're not talking about kingdoms that have 100, 200 players. We're talking about people that probably have 40 to 50, 30 to 50 players or less. And are, below a certain power threshold as well. And you're taking those kingdoms and you're basically merging them to where now they have maybe 300 players minimum, right? Where they can fill 1.5 alliances, maybe 2 alliances, just depending on the amount of players and whatever would get them to that median average power between kingdoms, right? So if it's 10 bill, maybe you can fully fill 1 alliance. Maybe you can do 1.5 alliance fill, maybe 2 alliance fill, just depending on the powers, right? For the players there. But the point is that it can also reinvigorate player motivation, participation, and engagement. Because when you have to think about, like, when you are just kind of on your own island by yourself, or you have a few amount of people, and you're not incredibly socially active, and you don't have enough people to participate or to do events, that can be demotivating. And that can just cause a snowball effect, however fast or slow it moves, to where over time you're just going to keep losing and losing players because of that. And the thing is that, yes, player drop off is a constant and real thing, even for new kingdoms. Once the next new kingdom comes out, you're always going to face player drop off. But the reason why it's more impactful in inactive, dead, or low activity kingdoms is because you already have a very small pool of players that are there. So you losing someone, as an example, if you have 20 active players and you lose someone, you've basically lost whatever that is, 5% of your potential activity? That's a big number compared to if you have a couple hundred people in there. It's 0.5%, right? Maybe it's 0.25% of potential social activity you're losing, and event participation. And when people don't have enough players available to participate in kingdom-wide events, KVKs, or to socially engage with one another, those are all kind of compounding factors that play into demotivation, into disengagement, into players feeling disengaged, into people lowering their activity, maybe worst case quitting, right? I mean, who wants to play with just themselves and a handful of others? Now, maybe some do. And I'm sure that's the case. I mean, it's one of the reasons why you probably have some players in RoK and CoD that will migrate to deadish kingdoms, right? So they can just win events all the time, right? And these are, or just maybe have a little bit easier of a time. But typically, if you're someone who is active, you're probably not going to migrate to a dead-ish kingdom unless you just want to maximize events, maybe resource reward winnings. You'll probably migrate to more of a mid-tier kingdom, someone that isn't maybe super strong and they're still growing, and maybe the particular requirements or the minimums, like certain goals and expectations that the kingdom has, is a little more lax. And again, you can kind of find anything and everything in between. But for me, I am all for merging. I just believe that it should be done carefully. And you should start off being a little bit more conservative, right, for one of those two suggestions I provided. And then if it feels like, okay, maybe we can go above 1 billion for the top 300, right? Maybe you start with all those kingdoms, you see where you're at, you see how the process looks of going through 3 to 4, 3 to 5 seasons, and then those kingdoms become eligible. And then, you know what, if it's like, okay, look, we've done all that, we've learned a good bit, you gather the feedback, and then you reassess and you say, okay, well, maybe we can go to 1.5 billion now. Or maybe, 10 billion isn't enough, or maybe it's too much, let's lower or raise that. You can kind of tinker with it, right? But I do think having a little bit more of a conservative approach initially, and then go ahead and make those adjustments from there. But I am all for merging, and I absolutely think that it should be happening. It should have already been happening in Call of Dragons. I think it could have actually helped stave off, and I'm sure with Rise of Kingdoms as well, for how long that game has been active, you could have saved a lot of players from quitting. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. However, I would love to hear from you. If you are someone who is in a dead kingdom, you're in a low activity kingdom or an inactive kingdom, and for any kingdom builder you've ever played, has there ever been a reason on why or because of that that you either stopped playing, you uninstalled, you quit the game, or or you just said, "Oh, I'm just not going to participate because there's not enough people to go in here." Like, how did that make you feel? What effects did you see? What happened in the kingdom because of that? I'd love to hear any stories from those of you who have been in situations like that. Let me know in the comments down below. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.